Hello, my name is John Dillon, and we're here to talk about Apex programming. Today is the second part of our Apex collections series, and we will be discussing sets, which are very similar to lists, but have a couple distinct properties. So let's jump in and take a look at how they're different. So let's show an example of working with the set object. So we can, the setup is the same. We do a set, we tell it what type we're working with, string. We're going to work with colors again, just to kind of so we can refer back to what we did in the last video. And again, call the constructor, telling it it's a string. It's got an add method. So in this case, we're going to be adding blue, black, and brown. And lastly, we can check the size. So far, this is no different than what we did with lists, and let's see if the results are the same. And they are. We had 3 colors, and we see 3 items being printed for our size. So how does it differ? Well, let's say we added black twice. Would we expect 4? It's still 3. And that is the primary difference between sets and lists. With a set, everything that we put into it is unique. With a list, this definitely would have dumped out 4. Lists don't care if you have repeats in the sequence. Sets do. So we added black twice, so the second time we added it, the collection said, we already have one of those, we don't need to add another. Now, how is this useful? Oftentimes when you're writing in Apex, there are going to be times where you want to make sure the things you're dealing with are unique. Sometimes when we're working with IDs, if we're feeding IDs into something like a delete statement, if we're going to be deleting a bunch of objects based on their ID, we don't want repeats, and that is something that could happen in a list, and a set will help make sure that you don't fall into that. Let's take a look at the set API. So the constructors are very similar. We can do a copy of a set. You can actually make a set from a list if you needed to go back and forth between sets and lists. We've got our add method, add all. This might be a good way to take a list and filter out anything that's duplicate. Clear, clone, those do what you might think they would do. A clear is a good way to empty it out. You can look to see if it contains. This is something lists did not have. Because our elements are indexed in a unique way within a set, you can do things like, oh, does this set contain this other item? Like in our color set, does it contain blue? Does it contain brown? Does it contain yellow? In a list, because a list is simply working with things in the order that you put them in, it can't do that kind of lookup, or at least not efficiently. If you needed to do that within a list, you would loop through the list looking for the item that you were looking for. Again, very inefficient. A more efficient way would be to convert the list to a set and then check for contains. That's kind of a useful trick. And we've already seen size. So not too different from list, just in some very specific ways. Now let's look at an example of where using a set in Apex might come in handy. So what we're going to do here is do a query for contacts where VIP is set to true. VIP is a custom field that I've added to this instance. It's not out of the box. And if you've seen the mini course, you'll see where we use that in other places. So we're going to select any contacts where they've got their VIP status checked, and we're going to collect up their account IDs. So what we'll do is we're going to loop through the contacts, and we're going to create a list of account IDs to keep track of. For each contact, we're going to just grab its account ID and store it in the list. which we'll use in a minute. We're going to create a list of accounts that will be used for updating. We're going to loop through the account IDs that we've collected. To do our update, a couple ways to do this in Apex. This is the one we're going to use today. Is we create a new account and we set the ID equal to an ID that we're working with, and then we make the change to the object. And in this case, we're going to change its description to say has a VIP, and then we're going to add it to our list and update that list. So again, collecting the contacts where VIP equals true, referencing its account ID, looping through, collecting up the account IDs, and then we loop through those IDs, create an account to be updated, make our change, and update the account. Of course, there are other ways we can do this, but this illustrates the purpose for what we're working on today. So let's execute it, and we see we get an error, duplicate ID and list. So what's going on here? What happens when we're grabbing these contacts, multiple contacts could belong to the same account. So when we actually create our list of account IDs by adding them here off of the contact, it's very possible, and in this case it definitely happened, that the same account was put into this ID. Normally that's not a problem, but here when we're creating a list of accounts to update and two of them share an ID, when we actually go to run the update call, that's when we run into a problem, because the system cannot make an update to the same account in the same update. When you're asking it to do it twice. If, for instance, we had different descriptions on the two different objects, it wouldn't know what to do. So a very easy fix to this is to say, well, instead of working with a list, we're going to change this to a set. That way, as we collect these IDs, we know we're not going to have any duplicates. The set object makes sure of it. And again, the rest of it stays the same. When we hit execute, it executes. And if we were to query description from accounts where last modified date equals today, here in our query editor, we can see we've got several that we've updated that description. Okay, well, I hope this was helpful to you. And now you've got another tool in your toolbox for collections. We've covered lists. This is sets. And we will get on to the third one in the next video. If you're enjoying this video, I recommend that, and you're either learning Apex or you've been programming in Apex for a while, I recommend checking out my mini course. It's free. The link is below this video. And it is a course on Apex patterns and anti-patterns where you can learn things to do and things to avoid when you're programming in Apex. A couple of them might be obvious, but there are a couple that are a little tricky. And if you're interested in that, just check out the link to the free mini course. And I will see you the next time.